Yesterday, good enough you were there, we saw almost everyone spoke, but if you look at it, give or take, they seem to be almost on the same page, but asking for one thing or the other. It could be on trust, it could be on what should be done before that particular subsidy is removed. But again, in trying to look at all of that, the question that pops up in the minds of some Nigerians is how can we ensure that the effective appropriation of these funds raised from the fuel subsidy will be adequately utilized for the benefit of all?
Okay, you have a point there. You see, Nigerians are suspicious. All this while, you've been telling them, we'll use this for this, we'll use this for this. We've had intervention agencies like the NDDC, OMPADEC, etc., in the Niger Delta, and yet I'm from the Niger Delta, we're still crying of deprivation. We still have infrastructural decay in the Niger Delta. We have people who still cannot even go to school because they cannot afford to go to school. We have network of roads that are comatose. We have situations where, in fact, in some areas, they don't even get light at all. So we must actually face facts. So Nigerians are suspicious of the fact that whenever they are told that these funds are going to be used, they actually most likely are not used because of such intervention agencies that have failed us in the past. But the truth about it all is, we should leave the past and look at the future. Why I say this is, the present government has a burden on its shoulder. It has come with a lot of transformational promises that Nigerians are looking at them and are saying that, look, even if we're going to give you this trust, we have trusted other administrations and they have failed us. But for once, we cannot continue to say, because we have always failed, we shouldn't give at least that benefit of doubt. Okay, so if that's exactly where I'm coming from here. I'm not trying to justify what has happened, because if we're going to look at what has happened in the past, there's no reason why we should believe government.
Okay, wait a minute. If we give this benefit of the doubt, if people say, okay, no problem, we'll let it go. If it doesn't work, what do?
In 2015, they voted us out. At least I'm a member of the PDP. What I'm trying to say, no, I mean, let's leave democracy out of this here. What I'm saying is that if it doesn't work, it would be very obvious that, look, an effort has been made. Because, you see, do we choose to continue to line the pockets of a few Nigerians? That's my question here. There are not maybe more than 20 who are super. You know what a trillion naira is?
You know,
I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Or do we continue to bear the brunt?
I don't think I don't think that's the issue. The issue about lining the pockets of a few million Nigerians, we have lined their pockets for years. And,
of course.
And that was not an issue.
No, but that's what I was saying. Do we continue?
They have said that the issue now is that if the government continues the way it's going, it will go broke. So that even if they're able to plug the leaks and stop lining the pockets of a few Nigerians, the government still cannot sustain the fuel subsidy as it were. That's basically what they're saying. Now the question is, over the years where this fuel subsidy debate has been raging, is it that nobody had thought all the while that there is a way we can actually do a host of things? Because it emerged yesterday that suggestions have been proffered even before now, even before it got to this critical point. You know, is it that nobody was listening, or is it that the government wasn't thinking?
Well, let me just go back in time. Remember, there was a petroleum trust fund being headed by Buhari. Abacha removed subsidy and said, look, what we're going to get from here, we're going to put in a trust fund, and we're going to get someone like Buhari, who is perceived to be credible and not has been tainted by corruption, scandals, if you might put it that way, to head it. And so Petroleum Trust Fund was also an interventionist agency. There were some gains in the PTF. We must face facts. Do you understand? It's just that there was also this accusation that the PTF was lopsided. They were carrying out development projects more in the north than in the south. But we won't deny the fact that there were no gains in the Petroleum Trust Fund. And so that's exactly where I'm coming from in answering your question. It's been there from time immemorial. You heard Adam Soshimole yesterday. He said the subsidy was just a thing of them just imputing it into the constitution until they raised it, the Nigerian Labour Congress, as at that time, to say, look, we can't continue to live like this. And they had issues with even those that were auditing the accounts. But you see, we have the Nigerian extractive industries that are supposed to act as a check and balance on the oil industry. You heard the Minister of Petroleum talking about the household kerosene yesterday and the aviation turbine kerosene. People selling HHK as 80k, even after it has been subsidized to 14 naira, and you're supposed to sell at 15 naira. And all of us know that kerosene is not bought at 15 naira. Most people buy kerosene at even 150 naira, and you now even go to sell it as 80k, making, I mean, that is pure fraud.
Oh, would you say that?
Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Would you say,
so this problem has been there. So it's not like it's not been there.
That's one inefficiency, and that's a sharp practice. But would you say that the government has been proactive in the steps that it's taken to make sure that when finally fuel subsidy does go, because I'm sure the government must have been thinking that at some point we actually have to stop this, whether proactive enough to think up measures over the years, have a plan that, at some point we'll have to remove it, but by that time we would have been self-sustaining, and by that time too we would have been able to encourage local production.
You see, let me tell you, that's a big indictment on government. Definitely they were not proactive, because if you look at from 2006 it was 67 billion, it went to about 64 billion in 2007, went to 101 billion in 2008, until it now did get to 1.3 trillion from the 250 billion that was in the budget. And we were told that 852 billion, Minister of Finance said that yesterday, was borrowed to help us finance the 1.3 trillion. So what I would say is that it's something that has come from over the years, and definitely the government was not proactive. If the government was proactive, they would have seen that it will come to a point in time where crude oil prices will rise, and we'll have to be using over 1 trillion naira to subsidize PMS. And so now that it has happened this way, you can actually lay it on the footstep of this present administration.
Well, anyway,
it's unfortunate it's happening. At this point in time, we must think of a remedy.
Well, let me comment here, because some say this is just not the time for the blame game. So that's why when they talk about government, they say the government from time past till this very moment is a collective blame they're putting on anyone. But again, I hope it's not because you're a member of the PDP you're on the side of the government.
No, definitely. I mean, there are areas you must also fault the government.
Is the subsidy the major cause for underdevelopment in the country, or the mismanagement of huge funds?
No, definitely not.
The 16 billion naira NIPP project funds?
Well, you see, it's sad because, we talked about this thing on the studio before, the 16 billion naira NIPP project, and the fact that even when there was an investigation done, it didn't see the light of the day. I remember we spoke extensively on it. I think corruption is the greatest cankerworm.
Shouldn't we find
that has eaten into the fabric of every department?
Sorry to butt in, because if we haven't dealt with that, and the amount we finally make out of the subsidy, the monster called corruption is still lurking around. So when we put that money somewhere, it's very possible that same monster will come and eat it all up, and at the end of the day, we're left with nothing.
I agree with you. That's why I said, no, it's not every time we have to defend government because we're members of the ruling party. I'm here as an analyst. I must be very honest. The government must have the will to fight the cabal, to fight corruption in all its ramifications. We have series of discussions. I remember when we talked about privatization on the same studio, I clearly told you that it is not going to be swept under the carpet. And true to it, you see what the Senate has done. They had not only adopted a wholesale approval of what the privatization committee came up with, they've passed it. And it's dominated by the ruling party. And look, if the executive government tries to hide that again, it will come to consume them. So it behaves on Nigerians to put the government in check. We have what you call constructive criticism. It's not all the while you say you must always be antagonistic towards government. You see what happened? Most of the people that were indicted in the privatization scheme, if you go into details, might most likely be members of my political party. Do you understand where I'm coming from here? And so it gets to a certain stage, you're not going to be mental. The president of the Senate is a member of PDP. But you heard him very clearly when he was talking about these issues. These are issues that are germane. How long can we continue to hide the fact that corruption is the biggest problem we have had?